Good morning, afternoon, or evening, everyone. My name is Jeremy Walsh, and I'm the Director of Support, Training, and Documentation for BNI Connect. I'd like to welcome everybody to the webinar today. Today's webinar is on the chapter goals. We're starting a leadership team version of webinars for the next week or so, and today we're going to be talking about the chapter goals program. One of the great things about BNI Connect is that it allows you to really plan out the course for your chapter for the next 6 months or the next year of your leadership team term, depending on how long and when your region switches officer positions. But not only does it plan it out for you, but it'll follow along as the year goes. So based on the POMS reports and the referrals and the attendance and everything else, it will put those numbers into the goals program so you can follow it throughout the year. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. And before we get started, just a couple of housekeeping things. First of all, this is a live webinar, so if you have any questions as we're going through the material today, please just ask. I'd be happy to answer those questions while we're on topic. The best way to ask those questions is to just type that in to the questions panel. Right by the questions panel, you should also see a thing that says handouts. And what I did was I created a spreadsheet that you guys are welcome to use as well in order to, sometimes it's better to have a leadership team meeting offline, work out your goals on paper, and then be able to come back and just enter it into BNI Connect. So that's what that spreadsheet is if you'd like to download a copy of that. Now we're going to record this webinar so that you can come back and review it anytime, or if there's other leadership team people that are on your leadership team but weren't able to make it today, you could forward them a copy of this webinar. You'll be able to find the webinar in a couple of different places once the recording has been uploaded. We upload them all to YouTube. So YouTube, we have a channel there, BNI Connect Global. So youtube.com/BNI Connect Global. You'll also find all of the recorded content on the support site. So if you just jump onto the question mark here in the upper right-hand corner of BNI Connect, that will take you over to the support site and you'll see our list of upcoming webinars. And right below that in chapter training, you will see all of the recorded webinars as well. And you'll see that we do have the December webinar series already up there for the first couple of webinars of this particular series. And then as soon as this one is done, I'll get it uploaded to YouTube, and we'll be able to review this one afterwards. Of course, as I said, you can always go directly to youtube.com/BNI Connect Global. And here we have our entire series of webinars and uploaded content, including things like educational moments and other shorter videos. But let's go ahead and talk about the chapter goals. Now, as I mentioned, it is a great way to really plan out your entire year or entire 6 months of your leadership team. One of the things that happened to us, I mean, we all have small businesses and we're all, a lot of us have wives and kids and all sorts of things, and on a day-to-day basis, we have a ton of stuff going on. So when it comes to our weekly meetings and running our weekly meetings, sometimes it's very easy to lose focus. And one of the things that the Chapter Goals program allows you to do is to really refocus, because it'll keep you on track from month to month. Now, the place to go and find this particular program is going to be under the operations menu. Now, the way I always remember where to find things here in BNI Connect is that we have the menus along the top. Of course, on the home screen, this is where we enter all referrals. We have our My BNI business and everything. But in order to do some of the more advanced things, we do have to go beyond this home screen. Now, network is going to always be all the social media functions, the networking components, being able to find your connections and the groups and the testimonials, things like that. Operations is always going to be input. It's really the day-to-day and week-to-week operations for managing your chapter, whereas reports are going to be read-only. Now, since we want to enter something into BNI Connect, we're going to go to operations. So under the chapter level operations, we'll see all of our menu items down along the left-hand side. And about halfway down, you should see something that says Manage Goals. And this is the Chapter Goals program. Now, by default, if you're on the leadership team or the executive leadership team, as some places like to say, meaning the president, the vice president, or the secretary treasurer, you should see this Manage Goals, and you should see both options, either to enter the chapter goals or to view the chapter goals. Now, your regular chapter members, they should be able to follow along during the year by going to view chapter goals, but they won't be able to enter them. So the first thing we need to do is we need to go in and start entering the chapter goals. We do that by clicking on Enter Chapter Goals. Now, before we can start putting all the numbers in, there is one important thing we have to do first. When we're entering goals, we're going to enter them in 6-month time periods. So you can choose any 6-month time period you'd like to. It doesn't have to start necessarily with what we start with here in BNI, which is generally October to April and then April back to October. By default, it's going to show you the next 6-month period, assuming that you've already done this 6-month period. But I'm going to go all the way back to October so that I can put my goals in for this current 6-month period. But again, you could start with December if you wanted to, or you could start with January, whichever date you'd like. Now, the next two things you only have to do once, and you can see that I've done this in the past, and it will save it until you'd like to change it again. So the first thing you have to come up with is the long-term vision. The long-term vision is kind of where do you want to get to with your chapter. Always begin with the end in mind. Now, usually when we're talking about long-term visions, we're not necessarily putting in the numbers. That's where the goals portion comes to it, but more of a end game result. So here in the BNI Burr chapter up in Antarctica, we've got a long-term vision. We want to grow the chapter, be the largest chapter in the entire continent. And in addition, we wish to be the #1 chapter in closed business and referrals within a 200-mile radius. So that is our long-term vision as our leadership team up there. Now, the mission statement is kind of what are your guiding principles? What's going to take you to that long-term vision? And there in Antarctica, we say that we're going to help members increase their business through a structured, positive, and professional word-of-mouth program that enables them to develop long-term, meaningful relationships with quality business professionals and create positive community goodwill. Now, of course, those are going to be in your own words and what you'd like your chapter to be and where you'd like it to get to. Once you have those things written down, we're going to go ahead and click the Go button. And this will essentially create a spreadsheet that we're going to fill out. Now, you notice, as I said, it is going to put in a 6-month time frame. And again, you can choose any 6-month time frame you'd like to. But we can see here that we're going to have a list of our chapter success drivers. So these are all broken up into these dark blue panels here. So we have attendance percentage, the total number of one-to-ones, CEUs, visitors, new memberships, number of members in chapter, number of referrals, and thank you for closed business. Within each of those sections, you'll also have a couple of different fields. You have the goal number, so this is obviously where we want to get to, and we're going to hopefully increase most of those throughout the course of the 6-month period. And then we have mechanisms. Now, the mechanisms really are the processes or things to remind you as a leadership team of what you want to do to support that particular goal. Mechanisms can be anything from something like a meeting stimulant. If you guys know what meeting stimulants are, where you do something fun in the chapter, that's a little bit different. For example, when you have the BNI game or when you're doing somebody else's weekly presentation that week. They could be educational moments. They could be leadership team initiatives. So all these things that you want to plan out. And again, that goes back to what I was saying before, where we're really busy and sometimes we lose focus of those things. So these mechanisms can really help you to plan that out for the year. Now, before we get started entering numbers, there's one other choice here at the top of the screen. And we can see that we can enter the goals for the whole chapter or per member. Where this makes a difference is really whether you're more comfortable thinking with bigger numbers or smaller numbers. When we go with the whole chapter numbers, we're just going to enter these in as basically number of, for example, one-to-ones that the whole chapter is going to do on a monthly basis. When we do them per member, what happens is when we get out to the next portion of this, we'll review the goals. It's going to calculate them out for you based on your goal number of members. Now, most people end up using the 4 whole chapter goals because they like to think in the bigger numbers, but you can do this per member as well. One thing you can't do is switch back and forth. So that will apply to the entire report, not per individual goal. All right, so let's take a look at some of these chapter success drivers and see what we can come up with. Now, probably the easiest one to do is the very first one here on the list, and we have attendance percentage. Now, here's just a little strategy that I have when you're working with goals, and this doesn't just apply to BNI goals, this applies to goals in general. But what I find easiest to do is we kind of know where we are right now, and we kind of know where we need to get to. So I usually like to put in the first and the last. That way I can know what I have to do in between. So for example, I know that in Antarctica, it's hard to believe, but it gets cold, and we have a little bit of an attendance problem. We're only running, at about an 88% attendance rate. Now, I know I'd really, really, really love to get it up to about a 96% attendance rate in the next 6 months. So now I know where I'm starting and where I have to get to. So now I know what I can do in between. And maybe we're going to get to 90 and then 92 and then 93 and then 95 and 96, and we can increase along the way. Now, I like to keep things simple. You can get much more complicated with this. For example, we know that during December and January, at least here in the United States, we may run into some additional attendance issues because we have things like Christmas and Hanukkah and New Year's and all sorts of holidays that tend to get in people's ways. So if we want to get complicated with this, we can go in and maybe we're going to lower the percentage a little bit here or in January, and maybe they're going to ramp things back up again in February and March. But my advice to you is to don't get too lost in the minutia with this yet. It's better to get something down and then go back and adjust them later than to overthink it and end up with nothing. So I'm going to keep this a little bit simple and just work on a straight linear path here. Now, mechanisms. What are some mechanisms that we can use to increase the attendance percentage in our chapter? Well, maybe one thing that we can do is we can make sure that our vice president is sending out the control letter. So when somebody's absent once, they send out a, hey, we missed you letter. And then the second time they're out, they send out a little stronger worded issue, all part of the membership committee plan. So I'd like to, let's say I'm president of the chapter, I'd like to make sure that our vice president and membership committee is following through with the letter. So I'm going to add that in as a mechanism. So control letters for absences. And you know what? This is something where we may not even have a whole lot of them in the beginning, so I want to follow and loop back around with that in December as well. So again, these are my reminders. What are some other things that we can do? Maybe another mechanism is going to be that we want to do an educational moment on the importance of being at the meeting. So I can just do educational moment on attendance. If you're not sure about mechanisms, a couple of suggestions for you. First of all, set up a one-to-one with your director consultant. Your director consultant is a wealth of knowledge about some of these types of things. But we also have the chapter goal guide up in the upper right-hand corner. And the chapter goal guide will give you some sample mechanisms for what you can use for each one of these chapter success drivers. And when I pull up the chapter goal guide here, we can see attendance. So an educational moment, let's say play the BNI game or follow-up phone calls by the membership committee weekly. How about implementing the mentoring program? That'll help your new members to make sure that they're there. Bring your sub day or handing out the VP reports. These are all great ideas for implementing some mechanisms. Now, if you'd like to, you can always just highlight it. I'm going to right-click and choose copy. And I'm going to put this one in. We're going to make sure we start the mentoring program early on in the 6-month period. All right, now here's where I recommend you skip around a little bit. Some of the next goals, such as total number of one-to-ones and CEUs, are going to depend really on how big we're going to grow the chapter, especially since we're looking at whole chapter goals. So before we look at some of these other ones, let's scroll down a little bit and look first at the number of members that we would like in the chapter. Now, once again, I know where we are, and I kind of know where we want to get to. I know that right now we're at about 26 members. And I know I want to get up to about 35 members at the end of this 6-month period. So it's a pretty aggressive growth. So now I know in order to do that, I'm going to have to increase by 9 members over 6 months, so about 2 members per month. So let's say that we're going to do 27, 29, 31, 33, and 35. Okay, so that's what we want to do. We want to grow our chapter to be 35 members strong. And of course, we can come up with some mechanisms for that. So what are mechanisms that can help you to increase the number of members in your chapter? Well, one of the things that you can do is you can make sure that you're doing the excuse the visitor process, where you do the visitor orientation at the end of the meeting. So we're going to make sure that we're doing the visitor orientation, where we bring them outside of the meeting and we ask them how they like the meeting and go over the application process with them. So I'm going to do the visitor orientation. And what's another thing? Visitors days. Visitors days are great for increasing the number of members in the chapter. So let's do a visitor day. We're going to plan that one for January. And of course, if we're looking for additional things, we can always go back to the chapter goal guide. And we can look at, for example, number of members in chapter, and come up with some additional ideas. All right, now here's where I always like to say you may want to save this. Again, especially if you are doing this live with your leadership team, somebody has their laptop and you're going through and you're filling out all these goals. One thing to keep in mind is that BNI Connect does have a 30-minute timeout, which means that if you don't do anything on the screen in 30 minutes, it will log you out of the system. And just like any Word or Excel file, if you don't save it, you're going to lose it. So make sure you hit the save button down here every once in a while, and that will save what you're working on. All right, so now that we know the number of members in the chapter, we should be able to very quickly figure out the number of new memberships. So if we're going to be growing by 1 to 2 members per month, we need 1 to 2 new members in the chapter, right? Well, sort of. In order to grow the number of members in the chapter, we actually kind of need slightly more than just the number of members that we want to grow by. And the reason for that is that every chapter does have a little bit of attrition, where we do lose members somewhat on a regular basis. And a lot of times it's for things that are outside of our control. Somebody gets a new job, or somebody moves out of state, or maybe they're having a life-changing event like getting married or having children or something like that, where they can no longer attend BNI. Now, the average that we usually like to use is, we lose about 1 member per month on average. So when we're looking at the number of members in the chapter, we really do need to keep that in mind, so that when let's say we're going from 26 to 27, we need to make sure that we don't just have 1 new membership, we have to up that by 1. So 27 to 29, we actually need 3 for each of these other months. So we need 3 new members to grow by 2. And we can again start putting in some mechanisms for that. One thing to make sure, we want to make sure that we always have applications on hand. Make sure we are stocked with apps. The visitor day, that applies to new memberships as well. So I can also make sure that I just copy and paste this into my new memberships goal. And there's plenty of other things that we can do in order to look at the new memberships. Now, of course, the driving force behind new memberships is, well, it's the next thing up. We're going to look at the visitors. So we know how many new memberships we need, we should be able to calculate how many visitors in order to achieve that goal. Now, does every visitor that join your chapter, or every visitor that comes to visit your chapter, end up joining your chapter? And usually not. So one thing you do need to keep in mind is you really need to look at kind of your conversion rate. How many visitors are coming to your chapter versus how many of them join? Is it 1 in 4? Is it 1 in 5? Is it 1 in 2? So keeping that in mind, most chapters have 1 in 3 to 1 in 5. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to call this one 4. Again, just for ease of use here. So in order to have 2 new memberships and 1 in every 4 people join, I really need to have 8 visitors in order to get 2 new applications. And the same is true if I want 3 applications. I'm going to need at least about 12 visitors. So I'm going to put all those in. And again, we can come up with our mechanisms. What are the things that we're going to do to support visitors in the chapter? Once again, we do have that visitor day that we're planning, so that is in support of that. Maybe in some of these tough months like November and December, we want to make sure that we have a good, bring your sub day, making sure that people bring their subs to the meeting. That is a great way to introduce people to your chapter and keep people engaged with making sure that they have a substitute. So it's kind of a 2-for-1 deal there. Other things we can do, a lot of people like to play the BNI game. If anybody doesn't know what the BNI game is, the BNI game is a great way to engage your chapter in an activity. It's a lot of fun. So what you do is you break your chapter up into like 3 or 4 or 5 groups, usually about 3, 4, 5 members per team. And you compete against each other. And everything you do in the chapter that's good is worth positive points. So you bring a referral, maybe that's worth 5 points, or you show up on time that week, maybe that's worth 2 points. And maybe if you bring a visitor, that's worth 10 points. So you really want to weight heavily some of the things that you're concentrating on doing. And if growth is something you're concentrating on, you want to make sure that you're giving plenty of points for the things that are going to help your chapter grow. All right, now let's start looking at some of these other ones. And the other ones are actually pretty closely related: CEUs, one-to-ones, and referrals. Now, when it comes to these ones, every chapter has their own goals for these. In my particular region and in our chapter, we have a goal of 1. That is our big mantra, the power of 1. So our goal is that we strive that every member in the chapter has 1 one-to-one every week, tries to generate 1 referral every week, and logs at least 1 CEU per week. So that makes this actually pretty easy when we're calculating out the number of referrals, one-to-ones, and CEUs. So if every person in my chapter is bringing 1, that's 26 per week, and we multiply that by an average of 4 weeks per month. So we're looking at basically 104 referrals per week or per month. And then we're gonna, if we have 27 members, then we're gonna be looking at 108. And then 116, and then 124, 132, and 140. And of course, because we're doing the power of 1 in our group, we can make that easy and copy those ones right up into CEUs and chapter education units and move those all the way across, and we'll have our numbers there as well. Mechanisms, we can come up with mechanisms for all of those as well. What are some things that we can do to support each of those goals? So when it comes to number of referrals, we can do an educational moment on BNI Connect and how to use the online slips program, or better yet, invite them to one of the webinars and we can teach them how to do that as well. There's some great value in making sure that you're entering your referrals online through BNI Connect. It really does help to speed the referral process up. Things like the BNI game are going to support all of those goals as well. And again, we can fill those in for the CEUs and for the one-to-ones as well. And then finally, our last one is our thank you for closed business. What are we going to turn in for thank you for closed business on a monthly basis? For this one, again, I like to keep things a little bit simple. Let's say that we want to be $1 million chapter. In order to be a $1 million chapter, we got to pass close to $100,000 per month. So I'm going to go ahead and put that in. $100,000. And I'm just going to go ahead and copy and paste this one all the way across the board here. And again, we can put in some mechanisms to help support that, maybe an educational moment on teaching people how to properly turn in thank you for closed business and how to use BNI Connect to do that and the BNI game. And again, if you're not sure of other ones, please go ahead, go back up to the top and click on the chapter goal guide, and that can give you some ideas as well. Now, when we're all set, we're going to go ahead and click the Save button. This will save it. And when you're ready, you can go back to the chapter level operations and you can now view your goals. If I go to Manage Goals and click on View Chapter Goals, it's going to ask me what period. It's going to choose the current 6-month period. And what it'll do is you can see that it has already started filling in my goals. We had an 88% goal in October and we actually achieved 97%. 90% and 97% again, as well as some of the other numbers down here. Now, these are all made up numbers, of course, so why don't we take a look at a real chapter that is doing this for real here in the United States. Now, there's a particular region of the United States, the Tampa area, led by an executive director. His name is Tom Fleming. He's largely responsible for coaching BNI on this whole goals process. And I know that I can pretty much randomly choose any chapter in any of his regions because every single chapter utilizes it. It's no wonder that he has a chapter average size of over 40 members per chapter. So if I go and I view the chapter goals, again, I'm just kind of choosing a random chapter down there. And here we can see some real live goals for a chapter. And let's see, the Direct to Success chapter. Their goal is to increase its membership to 45 over the next term and focus on the core success drivers and foster a strong educational program. One key success driver will be bringing in qualified visitors. A strong initiative will be made for visitor to new member conversion. So that is their long-term vision, and their mission statement at this chapter, the Direct to Success chapter in Tampa, is to ensure that every BNI member meets their individual goals and every member will have the opportunity to become E-Squared, which is an education initiative down there. The chapter's leadership team will provide mechanisms to ensure that each member knows where they stand in relationship to the rest of the chapter and BNI as a whole. So scrolling down, we can take a look at some of their goals and how they're doing achieving them. So their goal attendance percentage was 100%. We can see 96 and 97% and 90% so far in December. They have some educational moments planned out. They can acknowledge people for perfect attendance on a monthly basis. That's another great success driver. BNI is built on recognition. See their total number of one-to-ones here. Their CEUs are strong down in Florida. Number of visitors, number of new memberships, the number of their members in the chapter, referrals, and finally, thank you for closed business. All right, and that, my friends, is the chapter goal program here in BNI Connect. What I'd like to do is to open this up for any questions that you might have. I'd be absolutely happy to answer any and all questions about goals in BNI Connect, or really anything that you had about BNI Connect. I'd be happy to answer those questions now. While you're thinking of any questions, just a reminder that this is being recorded. You'll be able to catch the recording of this later. You can check it out on the YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/BNI Connect Global. Or again, you can always go to the support site by clicking on the question mark in the upper right-hand corner. That will take you over to the support site. and you can view the recordings there. Now, a great referral for me is to please let your other leadership team members and your regions and your chapters know about these webinars. Our very next one in this series is going to be tomorrow. We actually have a webinar just about every day this week. And tomorrow we're going to be going over the leadership team tools and reports. What we're going to do is a deep dive into BNI Connect from a leadership team perspective. This one is one of the few webinars that takes longer than a half hour. We're going to go about 45 minutes, possibly even closer to an hour tomorrow. And we're going to do things like, well, how do you enter a POMS report? And how do you assign a mentor pair on BNI Connect? And how do you assign the speaker rotation? How do you go in and look at some of these reports, and what good are some of these reports? And we're going to take a look at all of that tomorrow. And then on Wednesday, we're going to talk about the chapter web pages and how you can update your chapter web pages. And finally, on Thursday, the online renewal process. We're going to step through that whole process for the regions that are using those. So again, a good referral for me is to please let others know about these webinars or pass on the recordings to people that you think would need them. All right, so do we have any questions whatsoever? Be happy to answer those questions. All right, if there's no additional questions, I'd like to thank you guys. Oh, hold on a second. Martin says, hi, when will this be online to view? Martin, as soon as we get off this call today, I'm going to start the conversion process and upload it to YouTube. It takes me a couple of hours to do that. We should have it up within a day or two, absolutely no later than the end of the week, but I'll try to get this one done for you right away. There is another copy of this already in last month's webinar series, so you can always check that one out as well. But I should have this one up shortly. Excellent. Martin says many thanks. He'll be happy to share it with the rest of the team. Appreciate that. All right, any other questions? Stephen says to get an accurate reading on if you've met your goals, you need to wait until the month is over. Is that why attendance shows 90% in December? So the goals should automatically calculate with the attendance. It shouldn't matter how far you are into the month because it's taking it as an average. With some of the other goals, though, with number of one-to-ones and visitors and all of those others, those ones definitely will be impacted by the number of weeks in the month. But the attendance one, my guess is that that chapter just had a bad week, possibly a bad 2 weeks. And thank you for being here, Stephen. All right, any other questions? Going once? Going twice? All right, well, thanks again, everybody, for being here and spending this half hour with me. I look forward to seeing you on a future webinar. Happy connecting.